this guy named Mullah Baradar, who was basically the second in command, the military commander of the Taliban, second only to the leader of the Taliban, Mullah Omar, has actually been captured. This is a big deal.
A huge deal. I mean, arguably more important than Mullah Omar from a military point of view, because Mullah Omar really is more of a religious figure than an operational commander of the Taliban. This guy also is the number 2 political figure in the Taliban. The fact that he was discovered in Karachi is very significant. Karachi is the largest city in Pakistan. It's a long way from where the war is being fought. Indicates that the Pakistani intelligence services and the CIA cooperating very closely on a very high-value target, suggesting that.
Peter, doesn't it also kind of give the lie to what the Pakistanis have been saying for ages now, which is that, well, look, the Taliban is operating in Afghanistan; they're not operating here in Pakistan. If you have the number 2 guy of the Afghan Taliban in Karachi, that certainly seems to indicate a heavy presence inside Pakistan itself.
Indeed. Well, it's kind of a good news, bad news story. I mean, the bad news is that these guys have been in Pakistan all along. The good news is that the politics are shifting around this issue in the last year or so, and the Pakistani government and military are basically, they realize they created a Frankenstein monster that's begun to attack them, and they're willing to not only move against the Pakistani Taliban, but with this news tonight, against the so-called Afghan Taliban, which is in fact headquartered in Pakistan.
So, Robin, what do you make of this? I mean, when let's talk about what's going on in Marja. When Peter and I were there in September, everyone said Marja is going to be the big battle. And what basically they were planning to do was go in and not leave like they have so often before in the past, but actually go in and stay and kind of bring in what they're calling a government in a box to basically try to take over operations and show the locals that the central Afghan government actually can function and care about them. It's kind of an ambitious plan.
It's an ambitious plan, but it's clearly the only way the United States will ever be able to find an exit strategy out of Afghanistan. This is the kind of plan that should have been tried a long time ago. It's taken 8 years to recognize that you need something beyond just the physical elimination of your military opposition. You have to create an alternative economically for the people on the ground so that they support the national government. And so this is a beginning. This will be a very important test case to find out if the new U.S. strategy will work.
And Peter, how tough are the rules of engagement? I mean, we've heard complaints from some Marines about, look, you know, the idea here is protecting civilians. Civilians are actually the goal here, not so much the town itself or any amount of land. It's protecting civilians and showing that they're a priority. And yet that also makes it difficult to fight because inevitably, you know, there's going to be civilian casualties.
Well, there have been two, the last year or so, General McKiernan before General McChrystal and now General McChrystal, they keep tightening up the rules of engagement, making it harder and harder to call in airstrikes, which is absolutely imperative because the issue that most angers Afghans is Afghan civilian casualties. It's just something that drives them ballistic. And we've had, because of the lack of boots on the ground in Afghanistan, there's been an over-reliance on airstrikes. In fact, in Iraq, there were far fewer airstrikes than in Afghanistan precisely because there were not enough boots on the ground. Now you've got more boots on the ground. You're actually less reliant on airstrikes.
Robin, the New York Times is reporting that this Taliban military commander is basically being interrogated. The interrogation is being led by Pakistanis, but also that U.S. officials are involved. Obviously, that raises issues of how this guy is going to be dealt with because the U.S. now says they don't torture. Pakistan obviously has a history of being pretty tough with people they have in custody. What kind of intelligence could this guy possibly give?
Well, one of the important things to recognize that while he is a huge catch in terms of understanding the organization in total, the Taliban is in many ways a decentralized force, and it's not necessarily that he is going to be involved in knowing what every single unit on the ground is doing. The critical issue is how much will he talk and provide information on where other assets are, potentially where the Taliban in Pakistan are, and of course the United States would love to know where Osama bin Laden himself is.
Not to mention Mullah Omar.
Go ahead, Peter.
Not to mention Mullah Omar, who after all is Mullah Barad's boss, and he would have he might well know where Mullah Omar is. These guys are in constant contact. Now that kind of information is pretty perishable. The Times has sat on this story since Thursday because of the issue of not letting this being out there. The Times
right. The White
publishes
House asked them to not publish the story until word had kind of leaked out in the region, and the New York Times agreed to that because they didn't want operational intelligence that they may get from this guy to be blown by this story getting out.
But clearly, this guy, as Robin points out, he's not going to know. The Taliban is a decentralized group, but the Quetta Shura, which runs the southern Taliban, the one that's doing the operation in Marja, the one that's in Helmand, the one that's in Kandahar in the south, is run by essentially Mullah Omar and this guy. And so certainly in terms of the information about the southern Afghanistan operations of the Taliban, this guy is potentially a gold mine. I suspect he's not being read his Miranda rights by these Pakistani people who are interrogating him.
Yeah, no doubt
and one of the
about
big
that.
questions, of course, is...
Go ahead.
One of the big questions, of course, is what are they going to do with him? They can't take him to Guantanamo Bay. The Pakistanis going to prosecute him. You know, what do you do with this guy once you have finished with the interrogation?